Hello and welcome. I am Mundane Failure. This is Jeskai Control. Let's play. Today we're taking a look at the Seth Manfield version of Jeskai Control that he brought to the Strixhaven Championship. He was a top 8 competitor, ultimately losing to Jeskai turns, but I still think that this can be a very competitive and viable deck in the historic metagame. We are a companion deck playing Kaheera, the Orphanguard, because we are a creatureless control deck. So that is something to keep in mind if you want to play this deck, and we will jump right into the deck tech here. We will start with our card advantage spells, Brainstorm, Expressive Iteration, and Prismari Command. Prismari Command, not only a card advantage spell, but it can be a permission spell because it burns, or it can destroy an artifact. Very, very versatile, and a very good card to have as a one-of in any Jeskai Control list. If we look at our permission spells, we're playing 1 Aether Gust, 3 Memory Lapse, 3 Dovin's Veto, and 4 Lightning Helix. Notably, no absorbs in this list, so if you plan on if you think that the meta is going to be a lot of aggro decks, you might want to switch these Vetos for absorbs. I believe this was just a meta choice, thinking he's going to play against a lot of Jeskai turns, which was a high percentage of the meta at the tournament. In the Wraths pile, we have 2 Wrath of God, 1 Anger of the Gods, and 1 Rest in Peace. I put that in the Wrath pile because it's just so good against the graveyard decks. Rest in Peace also probably the reason we were playing no copies of Search for Azcanta in our 75. Our finishers are Gideon of the Trials, Narset, Teferi, and Shark Typhoon. Shark Typhoon is the creature that we are playing to finish off the game in these matchups, or Teferi Ultimate. Sideboard, we have obviously our Kaheera in our sideboard. We are geared towards the control-ish game matchups with Commence the Endgames, 3 copies of Mystical Dispute, and then for aggro we have Wrath of God, Devout Decree, Aether Gust, and then we also have Fry if we plan on playing against blue or white planeswalkers or creatures, and then an extra copy of Rest in Peace. If you like the deck list, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and let's jump into the games. We get to go second here, and I think that this is a pretty good keep. We have Rest in Peace. If they're a graveyard deck, that'll be very good for us, and then Memory Lapse into a Narset should be pretty powerful. We see a Hallowed Fountain from the opponent, so that tells me that they're probably on the Colorless Ramp deck, which means Rest in Peace is going to be a bit of a dead card here, but Memory Lapse should come in pretty handy. Guardian Idol from the opponent, and we're just going to go ahead and play out the Sulfur Falls so that we can hold up Memory Lapse if they have something powerful here like a Karn. And Karn is exactly what the opponent has, so we are happy to make them redraw that. Unfortunately, we have no way to get rid of it, but we do get to get a Narset down, so that's pretty good for us. Narset finds a Shark Typhoon because I think Anger of the Gods is going to be pretty much a dead card against this opponent. Opponent plays a Mind Stone into Karn here. We draw Dovin's Veto, which is going to be very good against the Forsaken Monument that the opponent found. We'll take a Memory Lapse and play out a Steam Fence. We will pay 2 life to do so that we can hold up both of our counter spells if we want to. Opponent minuses their Karn to look 4. Opponent finds Mystic Forge. We will Memory Lapse the Mystic Forge because they know about it. Opponent plays out a Mind Stone, which we are fine with. We draw a Brainstorm, so we'll play out a Shocked Sacred Foundry, and we will pass the turn back, hold up Brainstorm, Dovin's Veto. Maybe we can find something off the Brainstorm here. Opponent animates their Mind Stone, and then casts Forsaken Monument. We'll Brainstorm here to see if we can find another counter spell, and we just find 3 lands. So we will Dovin's Veto the Forsaken Monument to get rid of that forever. Opponent kills our Narset. I think we're just going to hardcast a Shark Typhoon here. I think that the ability to just make giant sharks with every spell that we cast is going to be pretty good for us. And then we might even just hardcast a second Shark Typhoon next turn. And opponent destroys our Shark Typhoon with their Ugin the Ineffable, which is fine because we have a second Shark Typhoon to cast. So we're just going to go ahead and play out our Shark Typhoon here. Hopefully they don't have a way to destroy this one. Otherwise we're going to be in pretty deep doo-doo. They have an Ulamog, that's going to be game for us. We have a lot of bad match cards for this matchup. All of our Wraths and Rust in Peace and Aether Gust. We'll bring in Mystical Dispute because they can counter spells. And we can bring in Commence the Endgame because we need to fill cards and it'll let us draw cards. But everything else is kind of bad for us, so we'll just run it back like this. We get to go first, and this hand is fine, but not great. So we'll start with a tapped Steam Vents here, and then we will Fabled Passage. We don't want to cast Expressive Iteration until we get to 3 mana anyways, so we're fine leading with a tap land here 2 turns in a row. So we'll go ahead and cast our Expressive Iteration here on 3. We find a Dovin's Veto, and let's take the Glacial Fortress so that we know we have white mana. The opponent has a Karn Great Creator, so that's pretty brutal for us. They take a God Pharaoh statue, so we will just send it back to the opponent here with a land drop and plan on... Hopefully they take their Karn down again, which they do, so we can Prismari Command it. Opponent has a Sorcerer's Spyglass, which we're going to let resolve. They get to name Narset, so our Narset is now a dead card, but we can discard it to our Prismari Command. So we're going to kill the Karn and draw 2, discard 2. And we draw a Gideon. Let's get rid of one of these Mystical Disputes now that we have 3 Dovin's Vetoes. And hopefully we draw a land here off the top. No land off the top, so we're just going to send it back to the opponent. They go for a Karn, so we will Dovin's Veto that. Opponent does nothing and passes it back. We're going to shock out a Hallowed Fountain and send it back to the opponent here. That way we can hold up Dovin's Veto and Mystical Dispute, or Memory Lapse and Mystical Dispute. They play out a Hedron Archive, which is perfectly fine. We draw it to Teferi, which I think I am going to cast and tick up. That lets us continue to hold up Dovin's Veto, and it'll hopefully hit us another land here. No land, but we do hit another Teferi. When it goes for a Forsaken Monument, I think that we're just going to Memory Lapse that. They have 4 mana available to them right now, so I don't think that we're facing down anything too scary after the Forsaken Monument. Another Hedron Archive, so that's fine. Tick up our Teferi here. We draw a Fabled Passage, which is very good with Brainstorm. Let's go ahead and cast that Brainstorm now. This will hide the information from our opponent. We can get rid of a Gideon that I don't think is going to be super useful. And one of these lands, I guess. One goes for this Forsaken Monument again, so we will Dovin's Veto that. They use Guardian Idol to get in onto Teferi. So we will allow that to happen. Hopefully we can get a Lightning Helix off of the next 2 cards to deal with that. Shark Typhoon also a good way to deal with that. Is Mind Tome fine for the opponent? Opponent attacking Teferi again. We want to make this shark just big enough to be able to still hold up a counter spell, so we'll make it a 3/3 here. And then of course we draw the Lightning Helix off of the Shark Typhoon, but we will still eat the Guardian Idol with our shark here. And then end of turn they do nothing else. I think we will just Lightning Helix them just to spend the card and the mana as efficiently as possible here. We start by drawing a card with Teferi. We draw a Mystical Dispute, so we will get in for 3 here with the Shark and just continue to hold up all of the spells we have in our hand. We commence the endgame on the opponent's end step will be pretty good. I think that we can afford to cycle this here because we get to untap 2 lands, so it's effectively cycling for 1, which is pretty good. Opponent sacrifices a Hedron Archive to draw 2 cards, looking for that Ulamog, I'm assuming. And they find the Ulamog. We do get to counter the Ulamog, but they're going to exile our Shark and our Teferi, which is a bit of a bummer, but at least we have a backup Teferi in our hand. And then we top deck another Teferi, which is not exactly what we're looking for, but at this point we'll take it.
Keep up the pace.
Lightning Helix is an okay draw. And we'll untap a couple of dual lands and send it back to the opponent here. Opponent has a Karn. We will Memory Lapse that. That way, excuse me. That way, they have to redraw it next turn. And we're just gonna Lightning Helix them on their next step again, just like last time, just to be efficient with our mana. Let's start with an Expressive Iteration. We definitely don't want to tap out for a Shark Typhoon here, so we will put a Lightning Helix into exile, and depending on what we draw, we may or may not cast it.
We need to.
I think we will cast it here, just to get those 3 points of damage in. Every point of damage is going to matter against this opponent, especially because their threats are so powerful. We want to win with the fewest number of attacks possible. So, opponent draws with their Hedron Archive again. Opponent has a Thoughtseize. They're going to take our counter magic, so we will just Dovin's Veto the Thoughtseize. Opponent has a Karn that we cannot counter. And another Forsaken Monument. We can counter this Karn with our Mystical Dispute. I'm going to buy Kaheera but not play her this turn. I want to be able to have as much mana as possible to make a huge shark. Opponent is deep in the tank here. They've used 3 of their timers so far. If they go for the statue, I think that we're going to commence the endgame to try and find a counter spell. The opponent timed out, so we get a free victory there. They might have disconnected or something, a little disappointing. I think that we were probably going to win that game either way, but I don't know how we would have been able to win the match necessarily. Well, I guess that was, yeah, no, we were down. So I don't know if we would have been able to win the match, but I think we were definitely going to be able to win that game. So a little disappointing, but let's go to the next one. A hand here on the draw that I am fine with keeping. Opponent mulligans to 5 and Thoughtseizes us. We're going to lead here with an untapped Steam Vent so that we can Brainstorm if we get the when we get the opportunity to on the opponent's end step here. And let's put back second Brainstorm. And we are just going to rest in peace the opponent, which we luckily drew so that they do not get to Thoughtseize us again. Opponent casts a Brainstorm of their own. Opponent has a Scourge of the Skyclaves. I think we're just going to Narset here. Hopefully that'll protect our life total a little bit. And we draw a Lightning Helix, which unfortunately will not be able to take out the Scourge once we take damage here, which we inevitably will. Scratch that. It may be able to take it out because we will gain life. An opponent draws Inquisition of Kozilek to take away our Lightning Helix, which is quite unfortunate. So we will Brainstorm with a Fabled Passage backup. We draw a Wrath, which is nice. Let's go ahead and put Teferi and Prismari Command back. And if we don't want to draw the Prismari Command, we can crack the fetch. Sorry, if we decide, based on what the opponent does, that we don't want to draw the Teferi, we can crack the Fabled Passage. So we're going to Brainstorm to see what the third card down is. Dovin's Veto, which we're not going to want. Prismari Command, we're not going to want. Put both of those back, and then we're going to shuffle, find a white source, and Wrath of God. That way we can get rid of this pretty good board that the opponent has. And we draw another Fabled Passage for turn. Hopefully the opponent doesn't have anything too good here, because our only answer is going to be Teferi. So ideally they would only have one threat here, and it looks like that's what they've got, is just the one threat. So let's play out our Teferi, tuck this Luris, and say go. Sprite Dragon, which has haste, will unfortunately be able to kill our Teferi here. And we're just going to buy and play Kaheera here, which hopefully will allow us to get in for some damage on the opponent's turn. Block any ground attackers they have. We need to protect our life total a bit. A Lightning Helix off the top would be very nice to deal with this Sprite Dragon. Expressive Iteration is a great draw for us. We get to take a Narset, and unfortunately 2 other dead cards, but Narset helps us dig a little bit deeper.
I train every day.
I suppose we could have ordered it so that we drew Dovin's Veto and Narset was in exile, but I don't think the Dovin's Veto is going to be very good in this matchup anyways. We get to Memory Lapse their Lurrus, and the opponent just scoops it up. I find that interesting. They could have knocked the Narset down to 1, down to 2, so we only get 1 activation. She doesn't get to stay out, but either way, we'll take it. So we're going to bring in Wrath. We're going to bring in Timely Reinforcements. We'll bring in Rest in Peace. We will bring in Devout Decree, Baffling End, and we will remove Dovin's Veto, which is all but a dead card in this matchup. Aether Gust. I must have accidentally brought that extra 1 in because we do not want Aether Gust. Not in love with Gideon. And I'm not in love with Prismari Command. We have a hand that's a little bit weak to a Thoughtseize, but I'm going to keep it. We'll lead on a tapped Triome here and send it back to the opponent. Opponent has Inquisition, which will take our Lightning Helix. Well, at least we draw another one. We have Shark Typhoon available to us from here on out. Dreadhorde Arcanist is fine. We get to Lightning Helix that. Narset a great draw for us. We will play her out. See what we can find. We find Wrath of God, Baffling End, Expressive Iteration. I think we'll just take the Wrath of God. Opponent had a Kroxa, which we discarded Fabled Passage to. Let's go ahead and see what we can find off of Narset here. Get an Expressive Iteration. We'll go ahead and cast that here. See what we find. I like Memory Lapse. And we'll exile an Expressive Iteration. I don't plan on casting that. We will hold up Memory Lapse. Opponent has a Claim. We're going to go ahead and Memory Lapse that. If they're able to attack with the Dreadhorde Arcanist, they get to Inquisition us again. Best of Talents. Okay, so at least they don't get to attack with it this turn. And we can Devout Decree to get rid of the Dreadhorde Arcanist. We'll go ahead and scry Anger of the Gods to the top here. That'll be pretty good against most of their board. We'll say go. Opponent buys their Lurrus and sends the turn back. We will do nothing so that we can make a potential 3-3 Shark. And we'll make a 3-3 Shark here on the opponent's end step after they play their Lurrus out. We draw Lightning Helix. That's a very good draw. Let's go ahead and get rid of this Lurrus. Bash in for 3. Send the turn back to the opponent and see what they got. They've got a Death Shadow that's a 2-2. So we can get in for 3 damage and then Anger of the Gods. Let's go ahead and play out the tap land. Actually, we can not get in for 3 damage because that'll put the Death Shadow out of range. So I'm glad I realized that before I attacked. Opponent gonna Kolaghan's Command themselves to get the Death Shadow out of range. Let's play out. Let's buy Kaheera and send the turn back. We're gonna take 4, or they're gonna get rid of Narset, whichever they choose. Opponent plays out another Death Shadow. I think that we just want to make a 5-5 Shark to eat one of the Death Shadows. Hopefully they can't damage themselves before combat. If they have another Kolaghan's Command, we're gonna get a little blown out here, and that'll be unfortunate. But I think that this is probably our best play right now, is to try and just eat one of these before the opponent fry. So we're going to take 8 damage here, which is unfortunate. So we get to Wrath of God and then play a Kaheera. I think that's better than playing out the Rest in Peace here. Opponent doesn't have enough black mana to play Lurrus and buy back a Death Shadow, so we're just hoping they fade a black source off the top. I did not realize they could Kroxa. That was a mistake. Should have counted their graveyard. So we're actually in deep trouble with that play right there. Expressive Iteration. Hopefully we can find a way out of this. We'll take a Teferi and a Timely. Timely gains us 6 life. It gives us enough to block out the Kroxa. Oh no. I totally jacked that up. We didn't have enough creature. We had the same amount of creatures, so that didn't actually... I'm just full of misplays this game. This is embarrassing. I'm just so used to the timely reinforcements allowing us to make 3 creatures that I didn't even think about the creature requirement on the card, and not playing the Rest in Peace the turn before was absolutely a mistake. So punts definitely lost us that game. I don't know that we could have won, but they definitely heavily contributed to our loss. At least we get to be on the play here for game number 1, and we're going to go ahead and shock in this Hallowed Fountain so that if the opponent has Thoughtseize or Inquisition, we can hide Rest in Peace with the Brainstorm. And they do have Inquisition, so we will hide Rest in Peace here, and we will hide Narset, and they can have the Memory Lapse. So we will play out Rest in Peace and say go, and hopefully this will be pretty good in the matchup. Sprite Dragon for the opponent. If they have enough instants and sorceries, we're going to be in bad shape, so let's see what we can find with Narset. We definitely want the Expressive Iteration over the Rest in Peace. His second copy is not going to do us much good. Opponent has an Expressive Iteration of their own to play. It's going to power up the Sprite Dragon. We draw Lightning Helix. Let's see if we can find an untapped red source off of the Expressive Iteration. We do. It's going to cost us 2 life, but that's fine. And we get to get rid of the Sprite Dragon. We draw another Lightning Helix after the opponent plays a Scourge the Skyclaves. Let's go ahead and just Baffling and the Scourge. That way we can Lightning Helix a potential play that they have on their turn. Use our mana as efficiently as possible. Opponent just buys their Lurrus, which is fine by me. We will play out a tapped land and Teferi. And hopefully Teferi can just help us take over the game here. Spell Pierce. So not going to get to resolve a Teferi. I wasn't expecting a Spell Pierce, I was expecting them to have Test of Talents. So that's a bit unfortunate. We have Double Wrath and Lightning Helix. We're just going to buy Kaheera and say go. And see what the opponent does on their turn. If they play into the Wrath, then we will Wrath. If not, we can just Lightning Helix the Lurrus. We have another Sprite Dragon. They attack for 4. We'll take 4. And we'll wrap 2 creatures. It's a good 2 for 1's good enough for this deck. We have Test of Talents. Let's Lightning Helix the Sprite Dragon. And they get to take a Wrath of God out of our hand. This is where playing Day of Judgment, in addition to the Wrath of God, would be beneficial to the deck. We draw Memory Lapse, and then Memory Lapse. So let's Kaheera, which is just a good blocker against the Lurrus, and then we'll have Memory Lapse for any play they might have. Thoughtseize, I'm happy to Memory Lapse that, so they don't get the information and they don't get to take our Teferi. Opponent deciding not to attack into the Kaheera. I'm happy to trade, so I will attack into the Lurrus, and luckily we have Vigilance, so we're able to do that. Opponent just didn't want to take 3 damage there, I guess. Let's go for Teferi. No Spell Pierce this time. And the opponent decides that that's too much for him, and they just scoop it up. So, despite our misplay, despite our horrible misplay in game number 2 there, we're able to pull out a win in game number 3 and take the match. We've got a hand here on the draw that's pretty good against a little bit of everything. We've got Shark Typhoon, Lightning Helix, and Anger of the Gods. And it looks like our opponent's going to turn 1 Thoughtseize us, which is a little frustrating, but not much that we can do about that. Opponent afraid of the Lightning Helix. And luckily, because the Shuffler's fine, we draw another Lightning Helix. And opponent has double Thoughtseize, because of course they do. We will play out a Sulfur Falls to conceal the fact that we drew a Steam Vents for turn. We draw a Rest in Peace, and that's what we will play for the turn. And we get rid of the opponent's graveyard. They appear to be on Sultai, which is an interesting brew. They're also playing Crawling Barrens with, 3-color deck, so It's a little bit unusual. Normally you don't see Crawling Barrens in the 3-color decks. You'll only see it in 2-color decks or 1-color decks. I'm happy to play out a tapped Hallowed Fountain and just buy Kaheera here. Spend her mana as efficiently as possible this turn. A third Thoughtseize for the opponent. Takes our Shark Typhoon. We draw Expressive Iteration, so we'll go ahead and play that out before we do anything else for turn. Maybe we'll hit a white land, and we hit 3 lands, but a little rough, so we'll play out the tapped land from exile this turn. Opponent has Brainstorm on our end step, and opponent just sends it back to us. We keep drawing pretty poorly, so we will play out a Kaheera. That was 5 lands in a row, or 4 lands in a row on top of our deck. Opponent has Eldest Reborn, making us sacrifice our Kaheera. Hopefully we can hit something pretty good off this Expressive Iteration, and we don't. Absolutely brutal. But Brainstorm should allow us to fix our hand a little bit here. So that's nice. We draw another land. Well, we'll put 2 back and shuffle them away. We will discard our Steam Vents to Eldest Reborn. We draw Narset for turn, but we're just planning on cycling a huge Shark Typhoon at the end of the opponent's turn, and hopefully Shark Typhoon will help us take out the opponent. Opponent makes a Shark of their own, a 4/4. Luckily, we can make a 6/6, which blocks their Shark pretty well, which is what we are going to do here. An opponent lets this happen, they'll have an instant speed removal for our Shark, so that's nice to see. Yahenni's Expertise for the opponent with no follow-up. Let's see if we can resolve it to Teferi here. Opponent has a Memory Lapse, but luckily we have Memory Lapse of our own. And we get to resolve to Teferi. Let's tick up, see what we draw.
I'm known for my excellence. Keep up the pace.
Another land, which is exactly what you love to see. But we get to untap 2 here. Opponent kills our Teferi with their Crawling Barrens.
Really should have seen that coming.
And we will Narset to try and draw out the opponent's Memory Lapse. Opponent does not Memory Lapse the Narset. Let's see what we can get. Aether Gust, Wrath of God. We'll take the Wrath of God because I think that Aether Gust is probably a dead card. Well, Aether Gust is definitely a dead card, actually. Opponent powers up the Crawling Barrens again. They're going to kill Narset. We draw another Narset. We will play her out. And unfortunately, we have no copies of Field of Ruin in the deck, so we're not going to be able to deal with that Crawling Barrens. And opponent Memory Lapses the Narset here. We will draw the Narset with Teferi and send the turn back to the opponent. Frankly, I have no idea how we're supposed to beat a Crawling Barrens that has gotten this big. I don't know that we actually can. And we're just going to go ahead and scoop it up here for game number 1. Alright, for sideboarding, I think we can get rid of Aether Gust. We can bring in commence the end games. We can bring in Mystical Dispute and Rest in Peace, probably not very good. Anger of the Gods, Wrath of God, probably not very good. Gideon will be pretty good against a Crawling Barrens that gets that big. Maybe we just get rid of all of our Wrath of Gods. And we get to play first with an unkeepable hand. If we had a red source for the Expressive Iteration, that would have been a great hand. Let's get rid of Commence the Endgame here. Delete on a tapped Tri-land and see what the opponent has to offer. Hopefully not a copy of Thoughtseize. They do not. So we will play out our tap land and say go. The opponent has Duress. They correctly take Expressive Iteration because that represents 2 cards. We draw Prismari Command, which is only fine against this opponent. We will Memory Lapse their Narset. We draw a Narset of our own, which we will happily resolve. And take
Keep an open mind.
an Expressive Iteration, which will let us draw into more lands. So they play out Narset just to stop us from drawing extra cards, which is interesting. We will take a Mystical Dispute here. Let's see what we can find off of Expressive Iteration. Find a Shark Typhoon and a Fabled Passage, which we will play out. And we can use this Prismari Command to make the opponent discard 2 cards, which I think we might do here. It just, we'll wait until we have untapped mana to do so. Instead, I think that we will Lightning Helix their Narset, see if they let that resolve.
You cannot
They
see.
They do let that resolve, and we will play a tap land and say, or a Fabled Passage and say go. Opponent does tick down their Narset, which we are fine with. They find a Memory Lapse, so we will crack our land here. And let's see if we can get away with Prismari commanding the opponent and dealing 2 damage. Opponent Memory Lapses that, which is perfectly fine by me. We will redraw Prismari Command, and we will try it again on their next turn. This time we will do it during their upkeep. The reason we're doing it on their upkeep, well, we'll do it on their draw step, is so that if they want to counter it, they have to use their mana on their turn, and they get to draw less cards. They have another Memory Lapse, which we will let resolve. One goes for a Narset, which we will Mystical Dispute. We're pretty happy to Mystical Dispute that. We're going to go ahead and buy our Kaheera, and on their draw step, we're going to again try to Prismari Command the opponent. And Prismari Command resolves, meaning the opponent discards 2 cards. So that felt pretty good there. They discard a Brainstorm and a Fatal Push. Fatal Push being a pretty dead card in the opponent's deck. Here, while the opponent is probably shields down, we will resolve a Shark Typhoon. They could have had a Mystical Dispute there, but I thought that it was probably our best time to try and resolve a Shark Typhoon. We draw Expressive Iteration, which is a great draw for us here. And we get to make a 2/2 Shark. We'll take a Narset. We will put a Brainstorm into exile, and we will cast the Brainstorm, which lets us make another Shark. And we will put back land Brainstorm. And we will play out a Narset. Make a 3/3 Shark. The opponent has commenced the end game, so they get to draw 2 cards. And make a 3/3. We hopefully get to shuffle away this We'll take another Brainstorm, which we will cast on the opponent's end step. Opponent cashes in their Vraska to kill our Narset. We're fairly happy with that result. Opponent attacks with their 3/3 zombie. We will block it with our 3/3 Shark. And we will Brainstorm here. Make a 1/1 Shark. And we get some cards that we're very happy to see. Dovin's Veto, Lightning Helix. And we're just going to get in for 4, and we win this race, so we're going to play as defensively as possible here. Opponent has a Brainstorm of their own. Opponent has a Thoughtseize. We're going to go ahead and Dovin's Veto that. That way they don't get any... they don't get to look at our hand, and we get to make a 2/2 Shark. Opponent casts a Narset, which we are unable to Mystical Dispute. That's okay, because we can Lightning Helix it down if we want to. Or we can always just let the Lightning Helix go face. Opponent finds nothing of value, and they scoop it up. Sideboarding, I don't think anything changes. We're just going to run it back. We have a hand here that I'm not a total fan of, so we're going to go ahead and send it back. This hand is much better. We'll go ahead and keep this, and I think we just get rid of the Prismari Command. And hopefully the opponent doesn't rip our hand apart with a Thoughtseize. They don't have one on turn 1, so that's good news. Brainstorm, Fabled Passage combo for the opponent. We're just going to go ahead and play out the Glacial Fortress so we can leave up Memory Lapse as an option. And hopefully, if we're able to get down Gideon of the Trials, we should be in good shape. If the opponent doesn't tap out here, we'll go for Narset, because I'm less excited about Narset. So we will go for Narset here. Opponent has Jawari Disruption, so I'm glad I didn't go for the Gideon. Opponent has a Narset of their own, which they tick down. They find a Memory Lapse. Well, while the opponent is tapped out, we will go for a Gideon of the Trials, which I messed up and we're unable to cast. So let's just buy Kaheera. Should have shocked in that Hallowed Fountain. Opponent leaving up. Memory Lapse here. We don't want to give them anything to target us with because we really want to hit our land drops. So we will cycle Shark Typhoon on their end step, make a 2/2, be able to threaten the Narset, and draw an extra card. Opponent's guys stop top bottom on the end of our turn. Opponent shocks in a Watery Grave, which is a little scary. They have Commence the Endgame mana, which they can always go for and make a huge creature. We will kill Narset here and play a Triome tapped and send it back to the opponent. They still have Memory Lapse available, so I don't want to play anything into that. Opponent just makes a big shark. Opponent has Thoughtseize, which we will happily Dovin's Veto. I don't want to give them any information. Opponent goes for Narset. I'm going to Memory Lapse this in hopes that they will use their own Memory Lapse on my Memory Lapse, and we can get that Gideon. They do not, which means that we're just going to pass the turn back and hope to make a 4/4 shark on the opponent's turn. We let Narset resolve here. Again, I want to be able to make a 4/4 shark. Thoughtseize for the opponent. I think that what we'll do is we'll make a 3/3 shark and then Brainstorm to hide a couple of cards here. Double Brainstorm is nice. Opponent has Mystical Dispute for our Brainstorm, so they're going to get to take a Teferi or a Gideon here. They choose Teferi. So we get to resolve Gideon of the Trials, which is nice. And we will tick up on Shark. We will attack the Narset, and hopefully we can get the opponent to block our Shark, and we can take it out with the Lightning Helix rather. That'll give them a trigger for their Narset, but nothing we can do about that. Vraska kills our Gideon, so we will go to combat and take out both of these planeswalkers here. When it tries to drown in the lock our 3/3 shark, we're going to go ahead and just Memory Lapse that to make sure we can get rid of both these planeswalkers. And then we resolve Kaheera and hope that the opponent didn't keep in Yahenni's Expertise. Drown in the lock takes care of Kaheera, and the opponent sends it back to us. We will get in for 5. And with land, we're not going to play it because of the Brainstorm. And we will take a turn here, get in for 5 again. And it doesn't look like the opponent has anything they can interact with us with. They should scry 2 here. Yep. Top bottom for the opponent. Eldest Reborn, we will Memory Lapse that, which will get Memory Lapsed back. And then hopefully we'll be able to find a Dovin's Veto on the top of our library with this Brainstorm. We find Dovin's Veto, and the opponent scoops him up, so that's a pretty good win there for us. And back for the wrap up. Just 3 matches today. Keep it a little bit of a shorter video. See if you guys like the longer or the shorter videos. I'm not sure. Let me know down in the comments below whether or not you prefer the longer hour to hour and a half videos or the shorter 30 to 40 minute videos, and I'll be sure to follow your guys' recommendation. But the deck certainly feels strong. There's a reason why it's it's the go-to control deck in the format right now. Lightning Helix feels very strong. I don't know that the Dovin's Vetoes are correct in the main deck. I think we might want Absorbs over those, and then any control deck that's not playing Search for Azcanta feels wrong, but I definitely understand why we're not playing Search for Azcanta when we're playing Rest in Peace. I think I'd rather have the edge over the graveyard decks, and I think that the number of Rest in Peace in our 75 might want to be closer to 3 or 4. So deck feels strong. Definitely recommend playing it if you've got the wild cards to build it. And thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to. If not, that's fine too. I appreciate you either way. Have a great day.